Nobody's going to know. My buddy was on the plane.
Nobody's going to know.
This is a wild quadruple decker psychological operation. You got to share it with everybody. Everyone should know by now that Dan Bongino is a sellout Republican propagandist.
I've seen the whole file.
And now he's a sellout government insider. Remember, it's a big club. Dan and Kash Patel are now in it, and you're not.
You and I are not in the big club.
I also need to mention that Brian Tyler Cohen is a Democrat propagandist. They both want you licking the government boot. Google-eyed propaganda Dan wants you licking the right boot, while Tempur-Pedic teleprompter reading propagandist Brian Tyler Cohen wants you licking the left boot. But both boots are connected to the same scummy central banking owners. With that in mind, check out this quadruple decker psychological operation where Brian Tyler Cohen and Dan Bongino work separately but in concert to get you to let go of the truth. How do they do this? Well, Dan Bongino always told his audience not to believe the government and that they're lying to you about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, all of a sudden, because he and Kash Patel are in the big club, you can trust the government. And Brian Tyler Cohen always wanted you to believe in the government. It just has to be leftist government. He's always called Dan Bongino a conspiracy theorist. But now that Dan's in the government, Brian Tyler Cohen thinks Dan's telling the truth. Because Dan's on the inside now and he just has to face the facts. For Brian, it couldn't possibly be that Dan is still lying to cover up government evils. So let's take a look at this insane psychological operations commentary breakdown from Brian Tyler Cohen.
I gave up everything for this. I mean, you know, my wife is struggling. I'm not a victim. I'm not Jim Comey. It's fine. I did this and I'm proud I did it. But if you think we're there for tea and crumpets, well, I mean, Kash is there all day. We share it. Our offices are linked. He turns on the faucet. I hear it. He's there he gets in at like 6 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't leave till 7 at night. You know, I'm in there at 7:30 in the morning. He uses the gym. I work out in my apartment. But I stare at these four walls all day in D.C., you know, by myself, divorced from my wife. Not divorced, but I mean separated, divorced. And it's hard. I mean, you know, we love each other, and it's hard to be apart.
But you're doing some great work. You're straightening out the FBI. You're moving buildings. There's a lot of change. Before we get into specifics, what did you think the job was going to be like? What is it like?
You know, the biggest lifestyle change for me has been family-wise. I mean, we already went through this with my time in the Secret Service. But, you know, when the president called and asked if I would take the job, you know, you can't tell your audience for years, go out and do stuff, talk is cheap. And then when the opportunity comes to do stuff, I didn't mean me, you know, I meant you. It's kind of you're a fraud. I mean, you don't sound like a fraud, you are one. So it was a lot.
He is a fraud.
It's been tough on the family. People ask me all the time, you know, do you like it? I say, no, I don't. But the president asked me to do this to like it. You know, nobody likes going into an organization like that and having to change things and make big, bold changes. But, you know, I was at one of our facilities yesterday down in Winchester, and a woman who worked there, very nice, said, you know, I used to watch your show. I miss you. I said, you know, I miss me too. You know, part of you dies a little bit when you see all this stuff from behind the scenes.
That was the deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, lamenting the fact that he's stuck working in the same government that he has made a career out of criticizing. And
that's a good criticism. He spent an entire career criticizing the government that he became a part of.
It's tough for him because now instead of raking in cash by opining on baseless conspiracy theories and trafficking in outright fiction, he's at least somewhat bound by facts and reality.
He's bound by facts and reality by being in the government that he once criticized, according to Brian Tyler Cohen. So basically, Brian Tyler Cohen is a statist. Dan Bongino is a statist. Dan Bongino is a red, conservative, rightist statist, and Brian Tyler Cohen is a blue Democrat propagandist statist. They're both statists in a ditch on the same road, heading in the same directions, speaking the exact same message. But here's Brian Tyler Cohen saying, hey, now that Dan Bongino is in the government, he's telling the truth because he's bound to tell the truth, which exposes his years of lies as he lied about the government. This is crazy.
And frankly, nothing better crystallizes this phenomenon more than the hours that Dan Bongino spent stoking mistrust and conspiracy theories about, for example, Jeffrey Epstein.
I'm telling you, there could be some national security problems here.
This guy's got some mental problems here.
Because, ladies and gentlemen, nobody knows how much material people have on Jeffrey Epstein. Who was videoed where those videos are. I was told by someone a long time ago, a very knowledgeable reporter, and it's not my information. I'm not hiding. I mean, oh, you're hiding up for some foreign government. You're protecting. I'm not protecting anyone. I'm only telling you what I was told. That some governments around the world may have some material that's related to the Epstein thing. Bill Clinton was knee deep in this, man. I have a very, very good source. I've told you this story. Forgive me for repeating it if you're a P1, but some people are new here and never heard this. He was on the plane with Bill Clinton and Epstein on one of Epstein's planes when Bill Clinton was on the plane with some women who, according to my source, looked underage. Why was my source on the plane? Dan, you know people who hung out with Jeffrey Epstein? No, I don't. He was working.
Look at this guy.
Right? It's unbelievable. The guy killed himself, and now nobody's going to know. My buddy was on the plane.
With all the strange coincidental circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein, like the CCTV camera footage all of a sudden not working, the security guards not checking on him, the security guards falling asleep, removing Jeffrey Epstein's cellmate from him right before all this stuff happened, all the questionable things that surround it, it is proper and appropriate to criticize the government for their official story, which historically speaking is a lie. It's propaganda. They're ministers of propaganda or public relations, or in other words, lies. Dan Bongino was on the right track on this. And now all of a sudden, Dan and Cash get a talking to, and now they're singing a different tune with zero evidence.
And was very uncomfortable. He didn't see anything directly, but there was like apparently some area in the back of the plane where everybody went to go, whatever, do their thing. My friend's not comfortable with it. They land and he's like to the guy who's running the show, if you know what I mean, I ain't going to be part of whatever's going on this plane. And the guy who's running the whole thing says, well, you need to go home.
Get off my plane.
That's the Air Force One thing, too. It's kind of like a similar story. And he says, you need to go home. So they send him home. But he saw Clinton on the plane with Epstein in the little area with people he thought didn't look of age. I've told this story 1,000 times, and it's amazing how, because it's the Dan Bongino show where
You're going to tell me that all the evidence of the perversion of all these political parasites can't come out? I bet there's so much footage, so much blackmail footage out there. The fact that it hasn't come out shows you how powerful the powers that shouldn't be really are. Right. And how much power they have over the political parasites who are doing the bidding of the Central International Banking Cartel.
About just about everything. Everyone in the media ignores it, even though this source is still out there. Anyone can talk to him.
Says, you know, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, you sure of that? I'm absolutely sure of that. That he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset. There's a big assumption out.
Intelligence asset for a place in the Middle East. Gosh, I wonder where that is. What place in the Middle East would have an intelligence asset here in the United States? I have no idea.
There that these videotapes were exclusively in the custody of Epstein. That's a huge mistake. The reason they wanted this story to go away is because there's an assumption like, oh yeah, Epstein had him. No, he wasn't the only one who had him, according to this source.
These assets, that's why this blackmail story makes so much sense. Which Middle Eastern countries they are, I don't know. Epstein was either a witting or unwitting intelligence asset.
Which Middle Eastern countries, I don't know. This guy is such a Zionist.
And they may have had his plane wired up.
And now, here's Dan Bongino trying to placate the very audience that he radicalized.
Radicalized, in Brian Tyler Cohen's opinion, and by his definitions and through his narrative, radicalize means to question the government, to not believe the official story. That's radicalization. And now Kash Patel and Dan Bongino have turned on a dime because they got a talking to. They've peered behind the curtain. They know what's going on, and they've chosen to become a part of the lie for one reason or another.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
And just take my word for it. Hey, Kash, how about the proof? How about the video footage? Give us absolute evidence that what you're saying is true. Because you're actually doing what the government's doing. No, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Just believe us. Well, we don't, because you kind of have a history of lying to us. So why would we ever believe you? Now they've become a part of the lie. They've become a part of the cover-up.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Now, you'll be shocked to learn that Dan Bongino's audience doesn't believe him. Why? Because they listened to Dan Bongino. One blogger for the right-wing site Red State wrote, Bongino makes a huge confession today that cuts against his years of conspiratorial bomb-throwing on his podcast and TV show. He concedes that in the investigation of the 2 assassination attempts, there is not a there in terms of some truths being hidden. He says, if there was a there, then we would have told you. Social media influencer Bongino always claimed there was a there, and there were conspiracies in the government, the deep state, to keep them covered up. But in the interview today, he says in the discussion of the 2 assassination attempts that there simply isn't much more to know than that which has already been made public. That should be a cautionary signal to many on this site. And frankly, that is tame compared to what his other fans wrote. This statement by itself is enough reason for me never to believe another word that Dan Bongino says. Deep state traitor. Epstein's case closed with a wink. Accountability, the same bureau that spied on Trump now wants to trust after years of targeting conservatives. Please. Real transparency starts with dismantling the 2-tiered system protecting DC elites. Clean up your own house before lecturing us on priorities. That's extremely insulting to the intelligence of the people who pay your salary. And the responses go on and on. Bongino spent years whipping his audience into a frenzy with right-wing conspiracy theories. Now that
whipping his audience into a frenzy about right-wing conspiracy theories. Anytime you have a government bootlicker who is 100% bought and paid for it in the cult of personality, and then they look at somebody who's questioning what the government's official story is, that person who loves the government is devoted to the government and wants you to follow the government, like Brian Tyler Cohen. Anybody who criticizes the government are automatically dismissed as conspiratorial. That's this guy.
He's in a position where he could finally substantiate his own lies and can't, his audience is turning against him.
So it's got to be that. It's got to be, okay, Dan Bongino was a conspiracy theorist before he got into the government. He told you not to trust the government. Now he's in the government and Brian Tyler Cohen's going, oh, he got a dose of truth. He realized that, hey, questioning the government and having all these conspiracy theories, that's not the way to go. The government was actually telling the truth the whole time. So now Dan Bongino is in the government and he wants you to believe that the government's telling you the truth. And at the same time, on the same side of the road, Brian Tyler Cohen is telling you, hey, remember how you couldn't trust Dan Bongino before? Well, you can trust him now with regard to the Jeffrey Epstein file. Just like I've been telling you all along, the government's telling the truth, and anybody who questions it or dares to mention that Jeffrey Epstein or suggests that he might not have killed himself is a conspiracy theorist. I want you to listen again very closely to what Brian Tyler Cohen says here.
Bongino spent years whipping his audience into a frenzy with right-wing conspiracy theories. Now that he's in a position where he could finally substantiate his own lies and can't, his audience is turning against him. But this is part and parcel of the right-wing media ecosystem.
Wow. Brian Tyler Cohen is telling you, see, Dan Bongino, who criticized the government, is now a part of that same government. And you got to believe him now because he's in the government and he got a dose of the truth. This is a crazy triple-decker psychological operation where Dan Bongino and Brian Tyler Cohen want you to believe the government. Share this video, like this video, subscribe to this channel if you like this content. And if you like this content, maybe you'll like some of my others. Check out my most popular playlist. Maybe there's something on there that you haven't seen yet. All of my videos are evergreen. They still apply today, just like they did when that news first came out. A government that calls you a conspiracy for questioning the government is a government that can't be trusted. I'll see you in the next video.